chemical signatures of the building blocks of life on other worlds. Is our solar system unique? Launching such a large telescope into space is an incredible engineering challenge. Fully deployed, Webb is too large to fit inside any rocket fairing. Engineers designed it to be folded, like origami, to squeeze inside the European Space Agency's 5-meter diameter Ariane 5 rocket fairing. After launch, controllers on the ground deploy Webb remotely. Deployment is an intricate ballet. For nearly 3 weeks, controllers carefully unfold Webb. After this delicate dance, Webb's golden mirrors are precisely aligned using motors behind each hexagonal mirror segment, adjusting them to form one perfect mirror. Once the instruments are fully cooled, the exploration will begin. Webb is a technological challenge like no other, born of the efforts of thousands of people across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The James Webb Space Telescope is your telescope. Use it to explore, to challenge theories, to see sights yet unseen. It's yours to unfold the beauty and mystery in the universe, and our place in it.
Hi, I'm Ellen Stofan, also known as Dr. E.
And I'm Thomas Serbogan, also known as Dr. Z.
And welcome to another episode of Easy Science. We're here at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, standing in front of the backup mirror to the Hubble Space Telescope. But we're not here really to talk about Hubble. There's another big launch coming up.
We're talking about the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. Many people have talked about it as the next Hubble, because Hubble has been transformative in our understanding of the sky.
And it's fun to be here in front of the backup mirror for Hubble. And so for people who are wondering, why doesn't this thing actually look like a mirror? It's the backup mirror. It's 2 plates of glass that are about 1 inch thick with that supporting structure in between. And if it had launched, it would have been coated in a reflective material, so it would have looked more like a mirror. These telescopes use these big mirrors to collect light, which then go into an instrument. So spectrographs are really cool instruments, and they've been used in astronomy and astrophysics for over 100 years.
Spectrographs, of course, having the ability of splitting up the light and looking at the composition of light and actually the originator, whether it's what gases is and so forth. And frankly, spectrograph also here in the museum, right?
In fact, we have over 100 years worth of spectrographs here at the Air and Space Museum. In 1929, Edwin Hubble actually used a spectrograph to determine the fact that the universe was expanding. We have a spectrograph from the Hale telescope at the Palomar Observatory in California that was used from the 1950s to the 1970s to look at the redshift of galaxies, of white dwarfs, and that helped us again understand the expansion of the universe. But I'm really fascinated with this issue of using a spectrograph to really understand what materials things are made of, how are they moving, and really just collecting that light, which James Webb will do from very early in the history of the universe.
So if you compare Hubble with Webb, there's really 2 fundamental changes. The first one is if you look at the mirror, this is 2.4 meters. It's like this, kind of roughly kind of my height. You look at Webb and it's unfolded, it's 6.5 meters. It's like 3 of me or more, right, with the hand up. So the other thing that's really exciting, the light that we're looking at is actually much, much colder.
And this idea that this super cold temperature and collecting this light with this big mirror is actually allowing you to look back in time as much as 100 million years after the Big Bang, which in the history of the universe, over 13 billion years, 100 million years is really soon after the Big Bang.
Recently, I looked at the album of one of my children's, with all the pictures, and I suppose I didn't know about the first year, what I would miss about the story of my child. He's now in college. And I think of the universe that way. We have not seen those pictures.
Yeah, like one of the questions I've always found the craziest is this issue of black holes at the centers of galaxies. Right now, pretty much every galaxy we've looked at has a black hole at the center, and so we are really curious about these very early galaxies. Did they already have black holes? Did black holes come later? Do you start with a black hole? Like, how does that work? And that's one of the questions that JWST is really going to go after. And we're actually going to be able to use JWST to start looking at the composition of atmospheres of planets around other stars. And that's really critical in this issue of, are we alone?
Absolutely. Looking at especially cold atmospheres and stars that are there, we can see molecular components, things that relate to life here on Earth, oxygen and so forth. Could you just imagine that? We're about to open that door.
And what I think people don't necessarily appreciate is the way we've had to push technology to get to this point.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of doing amazing new science. We develop new technologies. So consider this technology that was used to shape the mirrors correctly. That technology right now is being used by eye surgeons around the world. That's just one of the many benefits that come from a development like this.
So exciting. And I wish I could be with you at the launch, Thomas, but it's a little bit far away. And so can you tell us where the launch is?
Yeah, it's from French Guiana, a town called Kourou. It's right at that coastal community there where the European Spaceport is. We'll fly on an Ariane 5 provided by the European Space Agency. The Canadian Space Agency also provided an instrument here. So we're excited and ready for it.
Just like Hubble, JWST is going to help us rewrite textbooks for years to come. Stay tuned, watch for the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, and stay tuned for another episode of Easy Science.
This is a science mission on par with Apollo missions, Space Shuttle, International Space Station, and Hubble missions. For nearly 2 decades, thousands of people around the world, many spending their entire careers, built the James Webb Space Telescope. And it all comes down to this.
Once we launch the James Webb Space Telescope, there are no second chances. We have 300 single-point failure items, and they all have to work right. When you're a million miles away from the Earth, you can't send someone to fix it.
We've never put a telescope this large in space. We want to see distant parts of the universe humans have never seen before. Looking back in time, almost 14 billion years, to see the first galaxies that formed after the Big Bang. And we want to search for the building blocks of life in the atmospheres of planets orbiting distant stars. To unfold the history of the universe, we must first unfold this telescope.
This is the largest primary mirror, the largest sun shield, and the most powerful space telescope ever built. And yet, this large telescope needs to fit inside a 5.4-meter diameter rocket fairing. That's the largest fairing size available on any rocket, and it's the fairing size on our ride to space. The Ariane 5, provided by the European Space Agency, is one of the world's most powerful rockets. To cheat the fairing size limit, we built Webb to fold like origami to fit inside the rocket fairing.
And this brings us to our most challenging part of this mission, unfolding it in space.
Got it.
Think of what you're doing. You're taking this extraordinarily delicate, precise, state-of-the-art scientific instrument, you're slapping it on a rocket, and for the next 8 minutes, the explosion from that rocket is following you into outer space. Vibrating. Shaking. Everything that goes into outer space has to live through this environment, work once it gets there, without having someone come to fix it.
Two weeks. That's how long it would take to fully deploy the Webb telescope. We can take longer if we need to, but those 2 weeks after launch are going to be nail-biters. This is the Mission Operations Center at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore. Those 2 weeks after launch will be like our Super Bowl, World Cup, you pick the analogy. Years of training comes down to these moments.
Webb Observatory has 50 major deployments, 50 depending on how you categorize them, and 178 release mechanisms must work to deploy those 50 parts. Every single one of them must work. Unfolding Webb is hands down the most complicated spacecraft activity we've ever done. Then again, nothing about Webb is easy. We've never done any of this before. There's nothing simple about sending anything into space. You can't do it without taking risks.
This mission is squarely in new spacecraft territory. Webb is the perfect example of science desire driving engineering capability to new frontiers. Webb's unique design was born from reasoned engineering to accomplish its science goals.
Here's the plan. Shortly after launch, we unfold Webb's solar panel for power and our Huygens antenna for communication. About 12 hours later, we have an important engine firing that sends Webb on the proper course towards its orbital destination, about 1 million miles away. That's where Webb will do its science. Webb will be moving so fast it passes the Moon's orbit in 1.5 days, half the time it took Apollo astronauts to reach lunar orbit. First, we lower the sun shield out, then raise Webb's primary mirror and instruments away from the sun shield. The solar wind will push us around with the sun shield open, so we'll unfold a trim tab to help keep us stable.
We got these huge, iconic, golden segmented mirrors that will help us deliver amazing new images from the cosmos. But in some ways, the sun shield is a lot more complicated, and it's just as essential. Without it, nothing works.
Here we've got 5 sun shield layers, approximately 8,900 square feet, almost the size of 3 tennis courts, a very thin Kapton material, about 1 to 2/1000ths of an inch thick. Making them go where you want them to go in 0G is extremely challenging.
The sun shield shades the telescope from the heat of the sun, earth, and moon. The concept is simple, but there is nothing simple about the design or operation, especially when you get to space. Webb's sun shield assembly includes 140 release mechanisms, approximately 70 hinge assemblies, 8 deployment motors, bearings, springs, gears, about 400 pulleys, and 90 cables totaling 1,312 feet. All this just to keep the sun shield under control as it unfolds. First, we release these special restraints that protect the sun shield during launch. They roll out of the way, but not all the way until we are ready to deploy aside. Next, we release a set of covers over the core region. Now comes the critical point. All 107 sun shield release mechanisms need to fire on cue. 107. They free the 5 sun shield layers, allowing them to extend as the mid-moons deploy.
With the sun shield fully deployed, we start setting up the optics. First, the secondary mirror is extended and locked into place. A special radiator behind Webb is extended, which helps further lower the temperature of the science instruments. Finally, open the primary mirror's wings and lock them in place. With that done, Webb is in its final configuration, but we're not done yet.
After 47 deployments and accomplishing the hardest spacecraft unfolding NASA has ever done, Webb still won't be ready for science.
While the instruments cool, we'll control motors behind each of Webb's 18 mirror segments. The secondary mirror, and the fine steering mirror, located inside the center of the primary mirror. We'll precisely align the mirror segments to form a perfect mirror. Then, Webb will be ready to explore the cosmos.
제임스 웹 우주만환경 행운입니다.
Boa sorte. Webb के अनेक शुभकामना.
Veel succes, Webb.
بالتوفيق لويب.
今後祈ります、Webb.
हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं.
Constructing the James Webb Space Telescope, a mission led by NASA with its partners, the European Space Agency and the Canadian Space Agency, requires the collaboration of thousands of people from across the United States, Canada, and Europe.
The James Webb Space Telescope is the most ambitious and complex space science mission humanity has ever undertaken. Webb is NASA's highest priority science mission.
This is the optical and science segment of the Webb Space Telescope in one of the largest clean rooms in the world at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. This half of the observatory element successfully passed a series of rigorous vibration and acoustic tests to ensure Webb's optics and science instruments can handle the stresses of launch. This element was packed and transported to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, for cryogenic testing inside its massive test facility, simply called Chamber A, a National Historic Landmark for its work during the Apollo missions.
Successfully completing the optical telescope element was a significant milestone. And now we look forward to completing final tests of the spacecraft element and then integrating both halves into the observatory.
To give you a sense of where we are in the mission, the Webb Space Telescope consists of two main segments, the spacecraft bus and sunshield, called the spacecraft element, and the iconic 6.5-meter telescope and science instruments, called the optical telescope element. Today, both halves of the Webb Space Telescope are at Northrop Grumman in Redondo Beach, California. Here, the most advanced space telescope optical element will be integrated with the spacecraft element, which includes the tennis court-sized 5-layer deployable sunshield and the spacecraft bus, where the Webb's data and attitude control systems reside. The sunshield protects the telescope's optics and science instruments from infrared radiation, or what we feel as heat emitted by the sun, Earth, and Moon. Each thin sunshield layer is about 1/1000th of an inch thick and coated with reflective aluminum and protective silicon to provide sun protection of SPF 1 million. Webb is a testament to innovation. Intricate and advanced technological systems were developed to enable awesome science discoveries.
The James Webb Space Telescope is the most technologically challenging observatory we've ever built. No one's ever done anything like this before. The science will be worth waiting to.
Webb will conduct a breathtaking array of science investigations across the history of the universe, ranging from searching for the first distant galaxies to light up after the Big Bang, to searching for the building blocks of life in the atmospheres of exoplanets.
The observatory's capabilities are so enormous that major advances are expected across every branch of astronomy.
galaxies, whose light has been traveling to us for billions of years. But the farther away a galaxy is, the fainter it appears. That makes distant galaxies very hard to see, even for the most powerful telescopes, because they can only collect so much light. Fortunately, nature can provide a helping hand. According to Einstein, the gravity of massive objects can be so intense that it can warp the fabric of space-time. Light, which normally travels in a straight line through space, can show us where this distortion occurs. A very massive object will warp space and bend the path of the light. In a sense, warped space acts like a magnifying glass. A magnifying glass collects and bends light, making a light bulb, for example, appear bigger and brighter. Warped space can do the same thing to light from a galaxy. So what acts like the biggest magnifying glass in space? Galaxy clusters are the most massive things in the universe with the most gravity. When light from a very distant galaxy passes through a cluster, it is amplified and distorted, with the cluster acting like an imperfect magnifying glass. Light that would have gone in other directions gets bent toward our telescope. That lets us see the very distant galaxy in more detail. This effect is called gravitational lensing. Without this natural boost from gravity, it would be impossible for our telescopes to see far away enough in space and time to study galaxies in the early universe. The Hubble Space Telescope has made use of gravitational lensing to see many distant galaxies. And the larger James Webb Space Telescope will be able to find galaxies even fainter and farther than we've ever seen. With Webb, we will look for the very first galaxies to form and really learn about the early universe.
I saw you nodding. Did you get enough of that question? I'm afraid that was a little bit...
We have uncovered wonders undreamt by our ancestors who first speculated on the nature of those wandering lights in the night sky. We've crossed the solar system and sent ships to the stars. But we continue to search. We can't help it. A central element of the human future lies far beyond the Earth. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal.
the observatory's super sensitive electronics. And then kept on stability over a wide range of temperatures is why it's also a great choice. This modified version called MyWire. This is your telescope, an engineering exploration powerhouse. Use it to look back in time and explore the first galaxies that formed after the Big Bang. To peer in the atmospheres of planets and stars. It's a portal piece to the uncharted. This is the largest, most complex. It will change your understanding of the universe and all that's in it. The James Webb Space Telescope. Equipped with the largest primary mirror ever to be flown in space, at 6.5 meters, it's more than 6 times the size of the Hubble Space Telescope primary mirror. Webb's 4 cutting-edge infrared instruments and cameras operate at super cold temperatures. Temperatures colder than the surface of the moon. Getting this cold is done in the help of the largest sun shield ever. A 5-layer, tennis court-sized sun shield that blocks heat from the sun, earth, and moon. Webb will be the first telescope to detect light from the most distant galaxies in the universe. These first galaxies formed about 13.5 billion years ago, only 300 or so million years after the Big Bang. Webb carries advanced technologies to tackle some of the most fundamental questions about the universe. How did the first galaxies form and evolve? Are there chemical signatures of the building blocks of life on other worlds? Is our solar system unique? Launching such a large telescope into space is an incredible engineering challenge. Fully deployed, Webb is too large to fit inside any laboratory. Engineers designed it to be folded, an origami, the space inside the European Space Agency's defined after launch, controllers on the ground deploy Webb remotely. Deployment is an iterative ballet. Controllers carefully unfold. After this delicate dance, Webb's multiple lasers precisely align its rotors behind each hexagonal course, adjusting the to form one perfect mirror. Once the instruments are fully cooled, the exploration begins. Webb is a technological challenge that will grow through the efforts of thousands of people across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The James Webb Space Telescope is your telescope. Use it to explore, to challenge theories, to see sights unseen. It's yours to evolve mystery, purpose, and Hi, I'm Ellen Stoker, also known as Dr. And welcome to another episode of Science. We're here at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, standing in front of the backup mirror to the Hubble Space Telescope. We're not here really to talk about Hubble, there's another big launch coming. It's fun to hear from the backup mirror for Hubble, so for people wondering why does this thing actually go here, the backup mirror is 2 plates of glass that are about an inch thick. And using it to launch, to verify the materials of the mirror. These telescopes use these mirrors to collect light
massive numbers. Have to be able to split it up. Looking at the composition, right, and actually the originating gases and so on and so forth. It's like most spectrographic securities.
Yeah, like one of the questions I've always found the craziest is this issue of black holes in the centers of galaxies. Right now, pretty much every galaxy has a black hole in the center, so I'm really curious about the very galaxies. Do they already have black holes? Do black holes come later? To start with black holes? How does that work? And that's one of the questions that JWST is really going to grab. And we're actually going to be able to use JWST to start looking at the composition of atmospheres of planets around other stars. And that's really an issue of the world.
Looking at especially cold atmospheres of stars that are molecular things that relate to life here on Earth, oxygen and so forth. Just imagine that.
And what I think people don't necessarily appreciate is the way that we push technology to get to this point.
Absolutely. That's the problem with amazing science we develop consider because technology is just shaped. That technology right now is being used by researchers. It's just one of the many benefits that come from the web.
So exciting, and I wish I could be with you at the launch on this, but it's a little bit far away. So can you tell us where the launch is?
That's from French Guiana. That's right at that coast.
International Space Station, Hubble missions, James Webb. It all comes down to this.